occasional series of forums where we bring renowned experts in to talk with us and address leading topics of the day. And for all of our guests, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'd like to have a special welcome to my colleagues from the Ogilvy Public Relations management team from around the country who have all traveled here today for this important event. So colleagues, welcome. Please make yourself at home. And it's with great pleasure that I turn the proceedings today over to today's organizers, Natalie Adler and Francis Piyush.
Well, good morning. I'm Frances Heilig, as Rob said, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Natalie Adler. We're in Ogilvy's social marketing practice, and we're pleased to have so many of you joining us today for what promises to be a lively and fruitful discussion on behavioral economics. I wanted to say first that as a company globally, Ogilvy is firmly committed to understanding and applying the learnings of behavioral economics across many disciplines. And as such, we've convened this forum, among others, to spark interest and open dialogue. Those of us in social marketing, as well as our colleagues in commercial marketing and advertising, communications, finance, and banking, are really paying close attention to the promise that we think behavioral economics holds in bringing about consumer change, and whether that change leads to wiser financial planning, healthier lifestyles, or brand loyalty. So, you know, as social marketers, we know that change is elusive, highly elusive, and particularly in the absence of mandates. What's exciting about behavioral economics for me, and I think many others, is that it really looks at and considers human nature and how people really, the kinds of decisions that people do and don't make on a routine basis, whether it's because of procrastination or preference for an immediate reward versus a future reward, and then attempts to shape choices based on human nature and what appeals to humans in a real way, so that you know, we're motivated and change occurs. So I think it's a fascinating field. We're really honored to have Piyush Tantia here with us today from Harvard's Ideas 42 program. I know you're eager to hear him talk instead of me, so Natalie's going to say a few words about Piyush, and then we'll start the program.
As Frances said, Piyush manages Ideas 42, which is a non-profit behavioral economics R&D lab housed at Harvard University, and also leads many domestic and international financial design projects. Prior to joining Ideas 42, Piyush was a partner at Oliver Wyman's retail and finance and risk practices, and now serves as a senior advisor to Oliver Wyman. Piyush holds a BS in economics with a concentration in management from the Wharton School and a BS in engineering with a concentration in computer science from the University of Pennsylvania. Piyush will speak and take a few questions during this presentation, but we're also going to allow time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I turn it over to Piyush.
Right, thank you very much. It's exciting to be here. It's exciting to see so many people. So what I'll talk about is a little bit about some behavioral economics concepts. You know, there's a lot there. The field has been around for 50 or 60 years, so it's hard to cover everything. But I've picked some of my favorite issues as they relate to convincing people to do things that are good for them, and what gets in the way. So let me start with a story about vaccinations. The 60s, Yale was trying to get students to go take tetanus shots. Right? Pretty standard problem. This sort of thing happens, you know, even now. And there was a group of psychologists who at the same time were studying, you know, how to get people to engage in behaviors that are good for them. They were looking at fear appeals. Or, you know, is it better to give people a message that creates fear, something bad is going to happen if you don't do X, versus just giving them information? So they decided to do a study, and what they did was they said, you know, let's test the information part But let's also test something a little bit different. So here's what they did. They took a bunch of seniors at Yale. Half of these folks went through your typical education session, and they got a little brochure with information on it, listed all the benefits of taking the tetanus shot, it listed all the scary things that happen to you if you get a cut and you didn't take your shot, and all of that. The other group got exactly the same information, but they also received a map that showed where the student health center was, and they were asked to decide a time that they were going to go take the shot. That's it. That was the only addition. Right? So what happened when they did this? When only the information was given, about 3% of students went and took a shot. When the map and the plan was included, 28% went and took a shot. There's a 10x increase from what? Just helping people find the thing. And these are seniors, right? They've probably been to that student health center a dozen times by now. So this is an example of where little things can get in the way of taking action. It wasn't that the information didn't work. Some people went in the post surveys, everybody said, yes, I want to take a shot, I understand the information. The intention was created. But the follow-through to action didn't happen, and what facilitated that was helping people plan, well, okay, I'm going to go do this, and here's where the student health center is. So what is going on? Why does this happen? Right? The traditional view of human beings, probably held most widely by economists, is that everybody is economically rational. Everyone calculates before making decisions, they use all the information they have, their preferences don't change over time, they always act in their self-interest. Right? In reality, we know that's not always true. Right? People behave in strange ways. Right? Their preferences change over time across different situations. They don't always calculate before making decisions. They don't always use all the information they have, and they don't always act in their best interest. Right? But this is not intuitive, right? We kind of know this. So what is so different or unintuitive about what the research tells us? And what it is how much these little things matter and how much the psychology affects people. So what you're seeing here is organ donation rates for a bunch of European countries. Right? And you'll see on the right, these blue bars are nearly 100%. And then you've got Denmark, the Netherlands, UK, and Germany there at much lower organ donation rates. Now, you can try to explain this in terms of cultural differences, or religious beliefs, or social differences, economic. But it's pretty hard to do when you've got countries that are very similar on both sides. So what is the difference between these two countries? Just one simple little thing. In the countries that are in green, you have to check a box if you want to be an organ donor. In the others, you have to check a box if you don't want to be an organ donor. That's it. Is it laziness? Perhaps some people just don't read the form. But more research on this, and I'll show another example later, suggests it's not just laziness. It's also this idea of default. So people take as a recommendation whatever the default option is. So if I have to actively choose something, I assume that that's not the regular option. Right? That's something special that I'm doing. And that's what drives this behavior. So what does psychology research tell us? Is it just that we just have really small brains like Homer Simpson, we're just stupid, or is something else going on? It's not that we're just stupid. Right? Our brains are wired in very particular ways that cause some of these behaviors to emerge. So I'll tell you a little bit about those. I'll pause for questions at that point. And then the second half of the presentation is going to be examples of how we take these insights from the lab and research and start to apply them in real world settings. And then we'll have more time for questions at the end. So what I'd like you to do is read that and tell me the answer very quickly. What's the first answer that pops in your head? Okay. So now if you take a little more time to do the math, you'll realize that the answer is actually 5 cents, not 10 cents. But 10 cents is what most people say. That's what pops in our heads. And what's going on here is that your brain uses a lot of heuristics and quick thinking for these sorts of calculations. And that's not a bad thing. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't be alive. We couldn't possibly survive. And our brain has to make millions of decisions about every little thing. And it's wired to do this very, very quickly. So there are, kind of, one way of thinking about this is not a proven fact, but it's a framework that psychologists use, is there's kind of a system 1, which is quick reasoning. So that's what we're mostly doing. And then there's a system 2 in the brain, which is the cognitive reasoning. It comes in, it calculates, it thinks about things. And usually, what is happening is that you make a decision based on system 1 very quickly. And in some cases, system 2 comes in and says, wait a second, I got to check that first. Right? And then you think about it a little bit more and you calculate. But in most cases, you're reacting very quickly. So let's do another test. Let's see if you guys can do better on this one. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you shapes like this, and all I want you to do is call out the color. Okay, so in this case, we would say white. And for the more creatively minded, you could say gray or whatever the right term. Okay, so everyone got it? All right, so we're just going to call out colors.
Red, green, yellow,
So it's not a trick. It's amazing that your brain processes words faster than colors. And we're all trained to read really fast. So if any of you thought that you were a slow reader, well, I'll just prove that you're not a slow reader. It's another example of how certain centers, like our language centers, work really fast in the brain, and that comes before the task that we were trying to do, which is identify the color. So these two examples, again, to summarize, just showed this aspect of quick thinking that we do. The brain is wired to work very quickly, and that starts to explain why we make some of these odd seeming decisions.